Alrighty, folks, welcome back to HPP, the podcast that covers college basketball and the NBA draft inside and out. I am Rich Harris, and thank you for joining us again. Today, I'm joined by Caleb Slayton and Drew Barton, and perhaps Kam Jones will join us. He's supposed to be here, but you know how this show works. People just come and go whenever the hell they want. So, gentlemen, one thing about being unable to walk or stand for any length of time was I started on Thursday. Either I was laying in bed or in a chair, just so I wasn't in pain. And I started watching the games in sequential order. So no game starts the same time. They have them at least offset by at least like 15 minutes. And I watched the games in sequential order, and I watched all 48 games between Thursday and Monday. Now, I didn't actually finish all of them. Like Connecticut Northwestern was just too ugly to finish. And all the way to the end, I had no idea what was going on, who was going to win, because I stayed off social media. I stayed out of our group chat. And so all the games, I really didn't have any idea who was going to win. So yeah, I mean, I was out of tune with the rest of the world, but I got to watch all 48 games.
That's like the purest March Madness experience. I mean, outside of the pain, but the basketball aspect is like the purest March Madness experience.
Yeah. Outside of seeing it live, I mean, is there a better way to view it than have no idea going in?
Yeah. So we'll open up our college notebook, and I just want to get your guys' thoughts on, what games did you find most entertaining? What games did you find the craziest games? I mean, there were a significant number of blowouts, but there were also some,
absolute
nail biters. Fights. Yeah, exactly. So, have at it. What games did you find most interesting or entertaining?
I mean, I think if you want to go like purely, if you were to say the game of the tournament so far, for me, I watched the Oregon Creighton game. I actually watched that on my flight. I didn't have the pain, Rich, but actually my flight as I was coming back from our women's tournament got delayed 4 hours in the Denver airport. So I just sat there with my laptop, my work laptop, and an iPad.
You were in Denver for 4 hours and you didn't let me know? Come on, man.
Clay or Kam.
I had a very pissed off women's team that I was trying to help entertain, and
that's
because it was not a happy fight, but I got to watch a lot of hoops. That Oregon Creighton game was awesome. I started it in the airport, finished it on the plane. I thought that game, double overtime. I mean, you almost feel bad for Oregon because outside of their two guys, nobody else really showed up outside of Dante and what's his name, Cousinard. But that game was awesome. I mean, shot making back and forth. That Texas A&M and Houston game was a weird one for me because it had all the makings of an ugly game. Like, just shouldn't have been enjoyable. Like, bunch of guys fouling out. I mean, damn near 80 free throws. And yet that game was like super just engaging and engrossing. And I think if you have any doubts about why Houston could somehow gut this thing out and keep making a run, that game is the reason why. I think if you take any basketball person, and we are all basketball people here, just show them the free throws, the foul trouble, and the fact that it went to overtime, you're like, Houston doesn't pull it out. And somehow, with a walk-on at the free throw line, they get it done. But, I mean, awesome games. Colorado, Florida was a great game. Colorado, Marquette, which wasn't a great game, ended up being a great one. Colorado was my sleeper team. Unfortunately, they couldn't get it done. But, yeah, I think even though the bracket's been super chalky, the games have still been good. So that's a plus.
Yeah. How about you, Caleb?
I had two games. The Houston Texas A&M game was the first one that to me was just absolutely incredible, and especially to like compare it with. So I was over at a buddy's house and we were watching, and we had Grand Canyon and Bama on, and that game was just like, I know it was a close game, but it was so ugly. I did not enjoy watching that game at all. like my buddy that I was watching it with is a high school basketball ref and is like really smart, and so has very academic opinions about reffing and basketball. And that game was just a dogfight. It was it was just brutal. And so then to turn it over and to watch Texas A&M Houston, and it was like just as physical, but felt like there was some basketball being played and it was being called. And it was like 2 minutes left in the game, and you're like, oh man, Texas A&M's gonna win. Should we like turn it on to whatever the next game is? And it's like every 15 seconds, it's like, oh, is Texas A&M gonna get one? Is Texas A&M gonna get one? And all of a sudden they're back in it. And so that was a blast. And then the other one for me was the Dayton, Nevada game. My dad went to University of Dayton, has had like season tickets to UD since he was graduated college. So like my whole childhood was going to University of Dayton basketball. And I've been like relatively plugged in with Dayton Twitter. I know they had a successful season. I was the whole season, even when they didn't lose for 2 months, I like wanted them to fire Anthony Grant the whole season. You can ask my brother, like he heard all of it. And so I'm like driving home from work and Dayton's down 15, Dayton's down 20. And I'm like, this sucks, man. Like I'm like kind of happy because it means Grant's going to get fired. But this game is just, it's brutal. It's so bad. It's so ugly. Like just embarrassing for Dayton. And then we like get to the bar with some friends. And all of a sudden, like I get to the bar and all of a sudden Dayton's like down 10. And I'm like, all right, like they're kind of making a game of it. And then like the whole bar just like gets into the game. And, there was at that point in the day, it was the only game on. So every TV is turned to that game. Everybody's watching it. Everyone's going crazy. And so both of those games for me just like really encapsulated the ups and the downs of March Madness and just like doing it with friends too and getting to watch it with people that I love watching basketball with.
Kam, welcome. We're talking about what games we enjoyed the most, or we thought was just blew our mind, because there were some wild ones out there. So we've mainly been focusing on A&M and Houston, and a little bit on Grand Canyon and Bama. How about yourself?
Yeah, I mean the game for me was Samford, Kansas.
Yeah.
I think,
Oh my God.
we all kind of had that one circled as a possible upset.
That was a robbery. It was a robbery.
Yeah, and it was simultaneously one of the best defensive plays I've seen in a basketball game in a long time, and also one of the absolute worst officiating calls I've seen, probably in any basketball game. But I mean, and two, like Samford really, they had all of the momentum at that point. They had a really incredible.
They would have had a fast break. They would have had a fast break if that call isn't made.
5 on 4.
They were down by 1 with 14 seconds to go, and they would have had a 5-on-4 advantage.
Yep, and made an incredible play to get back in the game down 4. One of like probably the most unique out of timeouts I've seen. Like the guard that ended up shooting the 3 did this really like interesting sort of like loop back through a stack to get a really like perfect wide open shot. It was like something that they drew up in like Hoosiers or something. And it actually worked out for Samford. But yeah,
are you gonna start using that? Are you gonna start using that play for your middle school girls team?
1000%.
Do you have anybody that can make that 3-pointer?
Yeah, I got a couple next year, hopefully. But yeah, I will use that play. That thing was sick. Yeah, that was like the main game for me. I enjoyed watching Colorado, Florida as well. I thought that was a really just an all-around sort of beatdown in terms of how Colorado approached that game. But yeah, those were the 2 games that I really had circled.
First of all, I've never, ever, other than the playground, have seen a game like Grand Canyon, Alabama. That game was just insane. And you wonder why the SEC has struggled in this tournament. It's because those teams are just, all those SEC teams are just so grabby and so pushy. And the refs have been calling these games pretty, except for maybe that Bama game where they probably could have fouled everybody out on both sides. But the SEC is so used to getting away with all this grabbing and pushing and stuff, and they're not getting away with it in this tournament. But yeah, that game, I agree with Caleb. I mean, it was entertaining in the sense that it was crazy and close, but at the same time, it's really bad basketball. I don't think Grand Canyon ran a play in the second half offensively. It was just give it to Grant Foster and kind of get out of the way, but half the time they were in his way. But yeah, Oregon Creighton was weird because when that game started, Oregon looked like they were sleepwalking. They looked like they had just played like 5 games in 5 days. And Creighton couldn't hit a shot. They had open shot after open shot. And I'm like, oh my God, you can't capitalize on this lackadaisical Oregon team. Of course, Baylor, Shireman hit that, Dirk step back, to tie it. And but I really thought Creighton was going down. The Colorado games were just beautiful. Except for the Colorado State game. That wasn't super pretty, but the Florida. And as far as A&M Houston, again, I've never seen a game like that. And if A&M could just hit, a few of their foul shots more. I mean, what were they in that game? I mean, like 50% from the free throw line?
They missed 16. I don't know what the percent was, but they missed 16 free throws.
I will say like 12 of their 16 misses were in the first half. So
Okay,
it was almost like a tail. Like I remember them saying at halftime that they missed more free throws in the first half than like any other team in the history of the NCAA tournament in one half. So it was kind of a tale of two halves free throws wise.
Right. All right, so now let's there weren't any. I didn't think there were any huge shockers except for one, and that was Oakland defeating Kentucky. Duquesne beating BYU was a surprise. Yale beating Auburn was a surprise. James Madison beating Wisconsin was a surprise, but nothing that we couldn't have perhaps foreseen. It wasn't out of the realm, but Oakland beating Kentucky. So, I'd say for at least the last 5 years, it's become obvious you can't win with one and dones. Is that how we explain this one?
It's weird because this was a team out of all the Kentucky teams over the last, I felt the most confident in because
Yeah,
I
me
thought they still had the young guns and the one and done type players, but they also had mostly the pair of Mitchell and Reeves. That's kind of like the veteran, been here, should have a chip on their shoulder because their entire careers have been just them just not getting it done. And I think I know the hot take is, well, it's not even the hot take. The discourse is on Calipari right now. And I have to agree that I think he's kind of gotten away from what made him such a successful coach. And he's bought into like the swaggy Cal, the suits and the slick back hair. And I'm bringing in 5 stars. And he's always talking about it's bigger than the tournament. And it's about getting guys and changing their lives and getting them next level. That's great. And like, there's nothing to take away from that. But you're a basketball coach at Kentucky.
Right.
This is it's unacceptable. Like, I mean, it's completely unacceptable that you have a stretch and you're this mediocre when it matters most. I'm not saying you got to win 5 tournaments in a row, but you can't get to you're not even getting to the Sweet 16, the Elite 8 with the talent you have. So he all year long, guys like Reed Shepherd had bailed him out and had, exceeded expectations drastically. I mean, and it was a game where he looked like a freshman on the big stage, but you still had the veterans that should have been able to kind of bail you out. And I just think Cal needs to kind of almost look in the mirror and be like, I need to get back to that Pittsburgh Calipari where we're going to defend, we're going to be tough, we're going to, we can play with an offense, we can be a little bit flashy, we can bring some young guys in, but the standard's going to be kind of back to the roots of what wins in March, and that's your defense has to travel. You got to be competitive. You got to be gritty. And I feel like he's kind of so bought in the last couple of years into like this. I just pump NBA guys, and I'm the godfather of these NBA All Stars, and everyone loves me and wants to come back. It's like, but you don't win anymore. Like I'm really tired of like the not winning. Like that's great that you got all these guys in the league.
Well, here's what I don't get. When you know that it doesn't work, bringing in all these 5 stars, it creates more problems than it generates wins. Okay, because he feels the necessity to play everybody. Okay, because he wants to continue to get those 5 stars. So I'll give you an example. Connecticut has 3 4 stars that barely see the floor. Okay. I have a feeling we're going to see them in Connecticut uniforms next year. But it seems like the Kentucky guys leave no matter what. And he placates to them by always giving them at least like 10 minutes a game. You can't win by playing 8 freshmen and maybe a sophomore or 2, in there. You just can't win that way. It's been proven over and over and over again. So why continue to do it? Why not just bring in 2 5 stars, 2 guys you really love, you really think will fit into the system, and then build your team around that?
You would have thought that if your recruiting class was highlighted by Reed Shepherd and Dillingham, you're probably pretty thrilled. And then you build out through the portal. That's the way all these. Look at all these.
And maybe one of the big men, or
Sure.
maybe Edwards. But the other thing is, you say to them, you may not play this year, or you may not play much this year. So if you don't like that, go somewhere else.
Yeah,
to me, Calipari kind of reminds me of like Krzyzewski in the last few years when Coach K was there, in the sense where like he's kind of riding off his laurels, but then when you look at actually what he does when he coaches basketball games, they just don't run anything. Like they don't really run an offense. They don't really run a defense. He kind of brings in these guys. He teaches them some NBA concepts. And I'll say, to like defend Calipari, half of the NBA All-Stars, literally half of the, maybe not half, I think it's like 10 people who were named NBA All-Stars this year played for Calipari under Kentucky. Like, that's absurd. They have, like, if you look at wins above replacement for NBA players, and you look at just where they went to college, the number 2 college for producing wins above replacement for NBA players was Duke. The number 1 was Kentucky, and Kentucky has twice as many as Duke does. So, like, Calipari's doing something right on some level, right? But like,
right, but
as
not
far as coaching
not for the
he doesn't run an
university.
offense.
He's doing it for those guys, but not for the university.
Yeah.
The university
just to me, it just comes down to coaching. Like,
get out of that? What does a Kentucky fan get out of that?
It comes down to like, I remember when Duke had RJ Barrett, Zion, and Cam Reddish, and you want to talk about like, if freshmen can win, if 5 stars can win, those 3 dogs should have been able to win. But they, like, I remember I think it was like either Houston or Texas A&M that they lost to in, I think, the Sweet 16 that year, or the Elite 8.
No, they lost
and
to
they just
Michigan
did, like,
State.
I watched the game and they literally didn't run anything. Okay, whoever it was, they just didn't run an offense, and they just like rolled the ball out there and was like, hey, yeah, run some pick and roll, swing the ball side to side. And I think that's kind of what Kentucky does. And they certainly didn't have a defensive game plan to stop Gohlke, who can only shoot 3-pointers.
Yeah. Yeah, he had four on the season. He has 4 2-point baskets.
That's the dream. That's
8.
me.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Like I said, I think he's just kind of bought into the swaggy Cal hype. And if that's what you want to be, dude, go be an agent. Like, if you want to just like pump guys to the NBA, like, go be an agent. Like, you clearly know how to like market guys and brand them.
Or go coach G League Ignite.
Oh,
I said
you froze there for a second.
I said, or go coach G League Ignite.
Which they're getting rid of.
RIP.
Huh?
They're
getting rid of Ignite?
Yeah,
because of NIL.
Yeah, I thought, Ignite was a terrible system anyway, because those kids just lose. What do they learn? What do they really get out of that? It was a bad idea.
It's a different conversation.
Huh?
Yeah.
I know it's
That's a-
That's a different conversation.
but
for
it
another
does
day.
explain. It does explain actually why I couldn't get a hold of the communications guy for Ignite. I know one person has already left, and I didn't quite get it. And then the other person that was still there that I used to communicate with just wasn't taking calls or anything. So that explains that. Yeah, I'm glad Ignite's gone because I thought it was a terrible idea to put all those young kids together. It's kind of like Kentucky. Cam, do you have any thoughts about the upsets? You've been quiet.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that really stands out to me with this Kentucky loss is they didn't make any real adjustments. I mean, they got out rebounded. Like Cal loves to go big, but they didn't play through their bigs at all. Onyenso only had 4 points. Wagner only had no points. Reed Shepherd had probably his worst game of the year. I mean,
Yeah.
really, like the leader in their front court was Ivisic, and he played 13 minutes. I mean, I just, to me, it just screams like this is a little bit of a coaching dumpster fire here. The problem is, I think for Kentucky, they don't really have a great out. I mean, it's not like you can really justify firing Cal, especially with how great of a recruiter he is. It's super important in college ball. I think
They've already announced
You know,
he'll be back,
It's
by the
not,
way.
it's not as important. It's not as important as roster construction. That is the name of the
not.
game now.
Well,
That's the name of
yeah.
the game in college basketball. Roster construction.
Yeah, I just think ultimately, like, I mean, he has a lifetime contract. He's going to be back, like Caleb said. I think, if you're a Kentucky fan, the thing that you're hoping for is, Cal kind of steps back into like an advisory role, which they could do with his contract. And he would basically be like a GM. He'd be a recruiter first, and then, actually bring in somebody that can coach the young guys up. But yeah, I mean, by far the biggest upset, most surprising upset. Yeah, that was the most shocking by far.
Yeah. I said when we were picking the bracket last week that, if Yale was playing some other 4 seed that wasn't red hot like Auburn, I could definitely see Yale winning a game or two. So I wasn't totally surprised to beat Auburn. I will say this about JMU beating Wisconsin. Gregg Gard is another one who's just stubborn as hell. And his four best players are guards, but he insisted on putting 2 bigs on the court, and they really could have spread the floor and they could have attacked the rim, and they ended up taking all these crazy ass shots. And basically by having 2 bigs out there all the time, it jams things up. He really needs to get away from, especially in a game like that where he's playing a team that doesn't have a lot of size. There was no problem going with 4 guards and 1 big. But he wouldn't do it. Granted, the Wisconsin guards, they looked off, and they did kind of take a beating on their way to the championship in the Big Ten tourney. I just think, with some different coaching maneuvers that Wisconsin could have beat JMU. They certainly have much more talent. So that was disappointing. And I know Gregg Gard has been, he's kind of been, fans, he's kind of like Anthony Grant in the Big Ten. He wins a lot of games, but the fans are often unhappy with him.
Get him out of here.
Yeah, exactly.
Anthony Grant, that is.
Right. And I feel the same way about Kyle Neptune. I look at all the coaches that are gone, and, Villanova goes into the NIT, promptly loses, their first game. Kyle Neptune is just, he's a dumpster fire. But anyway, that's a discussion for another day. So the scoreboard, and I find this, I want to talk about this because I just find it funny. Every year, it seems like the big, this year to me, the 2 biggest slights in the field were Pittsburgh and St. John's, and and from the Big East and the ACC. And, all year they were saying the ACC is only going to get 3 teams, and the SEC and the Big 12 are going to get 50 teams each in. And how tough and rough and tough the SEC and the Big 12 were. Well, who's got the 2 best records right now in the tourney? Big East is undefeated, and the ACC is 8-1.
Yeah, but that's a little disingenuous because the Big East only has 3 teams. So
right.
They can they can only have 3 teams lose. Right. These conferences that have more teams, there's more potential for the teams to lose. And so just because the best 3 teams in the Big East are successful, or the best 3 to 4 teams in the ACC are successful, doesn't mean that the mid-level teams deserve to get in. So I think that's kind of not a great argument. Honestly.
I also think one of the things.
What I'm talking, but ultimately, when you get to the Final Four, we're probably going to have a Big East team and an ACC team, and we may have no team from the Big 12. We may have no team from the SEC.
Doesn't mean St. John should have gotten in. Just because UConn's great doesn't mean St. John's should have gotten in.
What I'm saying is every year they underestimate those 2 conferences. And you know what? They also underestimate the Pac-12. Pac-12's got the 3rd best record at 6-3. I'm just sick and tired of the SEC and the Big 12 getting 10 teams in each, and teams like Indiana State and other conferences only get 3. I'm just sick of it. They're not that good.
Oh no, I was just gonna say that these are always interesting when they put up the scorecards, because I always think too, we all know UConn's legit, we know Creighton's legit. It's also I also look at the seeding of them. Is anyone shocked that Big East is 6? I mean, they had a 1, 2, and a 3. Those teams should be playing this weekend. If you were to chalk everything out, which it did work out that way, they should have all won their way through.
I get that argument.
Yeah.
So, on the other side of the ledger too.
What's that?
I was just going to say on the other side of the ledger too, you have the Mountain West, who everybody was touting. They got 6 teams in. People complain about their seed, but they still got 6 teams in. And then they're 4-5. And outside of San Diego State, they're not that successcul.
Right.
So just because the best teams,
San Diego State is the only one alive again.
Yeah.
No, I think the Mountain West, that's I made this argument with DeCourcy either last year. I said the Mountain West, every year, we say how great they are. Yeah, they're great. They're fun to watch when they play each other because there's not much that differentiates them, and that makes it fun, but it doesn't make them good. Okay.
Yeah.
And every year they go into this tournament, and every year they get their ass handed to them. I don't know when we're going to learn.
I mean, I won't lie. I drank some Mountain West Kool-Aid.
Again, we're seeing the same thing over and over, whether it's Calipari or putting a bunch of Mountain West teams in, only to see them lose. And it happens every year. And yeah. All right. So 17 teams declined NIT invitations this year. I won't list all the teams out. That's got to be kind of a record. And so basically the NIT has become kind of like bowl games now, where teams, maybe they want to play, maybe they don't. Players, bow out themselves out of these games. So what do we make of this? And by the way, next year, Fox, to compete with the NIT, believe this or not, is going to have their own NIT-like tournament, which to me is crazy because the NIT seems like it's dying, and now they're going to bring up another tournament. So I just wanted to get your guys' thoughts. Is this something? Should we just dump the NIT or what?
I mean, I think this is just to be expected. I mean, I look at some of the teams, I look at a Stanford or a Washington, and I'm a little less critical just because they just fired their coaches. Do you really want to drag the players and the rosters and scrounge together a staff after you've, made a coaching decision that big of a change? Probably not. Then there's other programs, I look at a Memphis. just as an example that sticks out to me. And I personally am critical just because Memphis has been so up and down and I'm kind of over them. Like, okay, like, can you go compete? Like, you talked big game early in the year. Penny literally said, we know that our non-con is basically our schedule because we're going to run through the conference. You got ran through in turn. And then now you have a chance to go compete on a bigger stage. Again, I get it's not March Madness, but maybe go make a statement, end the year strong, and you don't. I think that's kind of chicken shit, to be honest. And then there's like other teams, like I would have liked to see Cal go, locally, but also like, Madsen's first year, definitely a turnaround. They definitely improved. That's an undeniable fact. But hey, like go get some postseason winner go home elimination experience for this team. So I kind of it depends. It's a program to program basis for me. Some teams I'm cool with it. Like I just fired my coach. I'm not dragging this roster through another week and putting guys on podiums to get interrogated. Some teams I'm like, again, kind of chicken shit. Go compete, go play, like for the essence of the game and for some pride. And then some teams I'm like, it's indifferent overall. Like I don't think Cal is going to win it, but I personally would have liked to see them do it just because you have a new coach. You're trying to build a program and set a standard of competition and winning and running from competition. But I get it. Maybe you want to give the guys a break or whatever.
Well, what about a team like UCLA, which is just filled with freshmen and sophomores, and they could use?
UCLA, Cal, I would view the same way. I would say like I would go. I would take my guys there and compete in that environment. That's just a personal choice. I mean, they might want to sit there and say, well, what about injury and all that? Well, you could have gotten injured in March Madness. Like, you wouldn't sit a guy for injury, potentially getting hurt in March. So, I don't know. I think it's a team-to-team basis for me.
But, I mean, obviously, to me, it's dying. And then,
then
they're going to bring in, and then they're going to bring in this new tournament to compete with it, which is mind-boggling to me. But I just wonder, just bear with me for a second. What do you think of some kind of NIT like tournament, maybe not all the way to a champion, but maybe have like NIT West, NIT South, something like that, and a winner of each, like 18 pods, and you'd play that the week before, so you'd actually delay the NCAA tournament by a week, and the 4 winners of those 4 pods would actually go into the tournament.
Yeah, I mean, like, ultimately, that's probably the way that the NCAA is going. Maybe not in that exact format, but there's going to be an expansion to the March Madness format at some point. I don't agree with it, but I think it's just another way for the NCAA to make money. And right. Ultimately, too, for the players with NIL, like the amount of exposure. I mean, we literally just saw it with Jack Gohlke. Dude literally signed like a tax insurance, NIL deal in the hotel after the game. Like players want that exposure. And that's kind of the difference too with the NIT. I mean, nobody's getting exposure from the NIT. The schools aren't getting exposure. Players aren't either. Experience, great. But if we can expand maybe the play-ins, I think the first 4 has turned into a really fun part of March Madness. It's great to see Colorado make a run. Granted, it wasn't a super deep run, but I think, say expanding that to maybe 2 extra play-in games, I think that would be a way, to expand March Madness, get some of those bubble teams in without completely, throwing the tournament out the door and bringing in like 100 teams.
Okay. All right. The next thing we're going to just touch on, not going to go into great detail here because we'll be talking about this all off season, but believe it or not, the portal already has close to 1,100 players in it. And, I went through them today. And one commonality I saw was that a lot of stars from mid-major teams are in the portal. Players like the best players on James Madison are in the portal, like Terrence Edwards. So interestingly, we mentioned a few last week, but I'll just run down some big names, and I don't know if you guys have any thoughts. Kobe Johnson of USC, Cliff Amore of Rutgers, Garway Dual of Providence, which kind of surprised me. I don't know why he's leaving there. I'll just Tucker DeVries of Drake is leaving, probably to follow his father, who's changed. Who's he coaching now?
West Virginia.
West Virginia, right? So actually, Drake's 3 best players are in the portal. So I would assume that they're all probably going to follow him to West Virginia. Riley Kugel it jumped in the portal. Another one that surprised me was Javon Hadley. And you guys in Colorado are probably very familiar with Hadley. And to me, he's such an underrated player, but I actually think he has NBA potential. I'm not sure. Maybe he's thinking De Silva's gone. Cody Williams is gone. Simpson maybe is gone. So maybe he's just looking to be on a more competitive team.
Eddie Lampkin jumped in the
into the portal today too.
What's that?
Yeah. Eddie Lampkin just jumped in too.
Yes.
To the portal.
Lampkin, yes.
Yeah.
And well, Eddie Lampkin to me is just, yeah. I mean, he left TCU in the heart of a tournament run. He's just, I'm not too keen on Eddie Lampkin. Any thoughts about the portal?
I mean, I think it's a little early to see kind of how everything shakes out, but I just remember feeling over the last couple of days, any time that anybody would get into the portal, I'd be like, oh, they got some potential. Like they could really offer some of these bigger schools like some experience in their rotation. And especially the last couple of days, like with some of the guys that you just named, and even some guys we haven't got to, like there's some legitimate starters for some big schools potentially in the portal. So I'm excited. I'm interested to see how it all shakes out. But I think it'll take a while to get there.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, 1,100 already. It's who knows how it's all going to shake out. But if you're looking to reshape your team, there's plenty of good players out there available to do it if you can get them. Another item in the notebook is the draft, and not many people have declared yet, but some have. Kalel Ware is probably the biggest name so far. Well, no, Zach Edey as well. Bobby Klitman, who played for Wake Forest, but now has been playing in Australia. He's declared. Kobe Johnson, again, of USC's declared, but most of these guys have declared with the option to come back. The ones I'm seeing, AJ Storr of Wisconsin is another notable player. So yeah, people, it's early days, but those are some of the big names that have already declared. And lastly, injury updates for the tournament, and most of this is no real hard bad news. Jeremy Roach dislocated his finger in the last game, but he was able to return. I suppose that could affect him some for Duke's game coming up. Juwan Roberts re-aggravated that shin injury, and it looked for a little bit that maybe they had lost him for the game, but then he ended up being the only starter for Houston left on the court when the overtime finished against Texas A&M. And lastly, Latrell Wrightsell of Alabama, he actually took a couple hits during the first week of the first 2 rounds of the tournament, and he had already missed like a week or two because of concussion, and then he got banged in the head a couple times. He couldn't finish that game against Grand Canyon, but they say he's going to be ready to roll for the Sweet 16. So that ends our college notebook. So we'll move on to the stock report. And I have a long list here, gentlemen, of guys who have done well in the tournament. I have a not so long list of guys who didn't do so well in the tournament. And I guess my question to you guys is, who do you think has helped themselves the most in terms of draft stock?
I mean, I think like one that, we were familiar with. Like, you look at this list and there's a lot of guys on here that like are, college stars. Like, I don't think we need to talk about like a Zach Edey or, a Terrence Shannon Jr. Like these guys have been dominating like year round. People are pretty aware. Like for me, a guy that I think put himself on the national radar is a guy we're familiar with Grant Foster. We talked about him briefly at Grand Canyon. Like he went onto a stage against a good SMC defense and was the best player on the court. And then, went toe to toe against an Alabama team that has been computer darlings, Ken Palm darlings, that has legit high level NBA athletes. And again, for a large swaths of that game, like basically single-handedly kept Grand Canyon within striking distance. So he's a guy that I think people are going to look at him. It's a school no one really talks about. It's a player that has probably fallen out of the discourse just because of his, the heart surgeries and missing time. For me, I think he's just kind of reasserted himself as somebody, I'm not saying he's a first-round pick, but like he looked like it. He flashed NBA upside in those games on a national stage. When you look at some of these other guys where I'm like, okay, like we're pretty aware of what you've done because you've been in that discussion all year or for most of your college career. So that's one that stands out to me.
Kam?
Yeah, I think a lot about Kam Jones just on Marquette. I think
exactly.
So much of the story, with Marquette, people really focus heavily on Oso Ighodaro, focus really heavily on Kohlke, and Kam Jones just kind of flies under the radar. And he's had a really great tournament so far, shooting the ball really well, doing all the Kam Jones athleticism things that he can do. Yeah, I think he's probably the guy that stands out the most to me.
Caleb?
I got a couple. I think we really saw the importance of Kohlke, right? Like Marquette, they didn't look 100%. I think coming into the tournament, obviously with Kohlke missing time, and then Kohlke coming back, really seeing just how good he is at getting to his spots, at using angles, at passing, and getting to his shots. I thought that was really impressive. I loved what I saw out of Tristan da Silva in those couple games from Colorado. I don't know how he's not a first round guy. I didn't really see him be discussed as a first round guy coming into the tournament. I certainly think he should be. Just so skilled, so long, like so incredibly polished, and I don't think there's an area of the court that he can't score on. Two other guys just from my own team real quick. The two Duke guys, both Filipowski and McCain. Like you want to talk about not that they weren't going to get drafted, like both were going to get drafted, but I think against JMU, Filipowski really, I don't know about answered some questions, but I think really showed the ability to switch on to perimeter guys, maybe a little bit better, certainly than I had expected. Is really going to benefit him and kind of benefit him at the next level and benefit his stock. And then, man, I feel like McCain has been shooting up draft boards and like this tournament has definitely helped. Just such a gamer, such a shooter. Wasserman released like a mock draft today and had McCain at 11.
Wow.
I saw somebody else talking about,
and you know how much respect
McCain.
I have for Wasserman.
I know. Somebody that I personally have a lot of respect for from NBA draft stuff said that McCain and Reed Shepherd should be basically viewed as the same kind of prospect and in the same tier of prospect. And so those are the guys that kind of stuck out to me as like either kind of reminding us of they're really damn good or just kind of putting themselves back on the radar, helping their stock in a different way.
All right. I like all your answers. And I think Grant Foster is the biggest winner. As I watched all 48 games this weekend, after every game, I look over the draft board and decide, do I want to move these guys at all? And so I have been moving guys here and there. And Grant Foster has been the biggest winner as far as jumping up on the draft board. McCain has definitely moved up. Kam Jones has definitely moved up. Jack Gohlke actually made it on our draft board. Now he's probably at about 750, but he wasn't on our draft board before this tournament. So
hey, he's number one on the tax accountant draft board, so that's what really matters.
But I think Sears of Alabama definitely is probably going to move into I moved him into our top 100. Terrence Shannon Jr. I now have in lottery range. Jaedon LeDee is moving up because of his ability. You know, he's already demonstrated he's very, very adept at the mid-range shot, but now he's starting to shoot him from threes. So moving him up. Let's see who else. McCain is definitely getting closer and closer to the lottery for me. And
Shout out Rich for having 2 Zags on that list, by the way. We
well,
appreciate
that's
the
the
love.
next guy I'm going to mention is Ben Gregg has broken.
That's my guy.
He has broken into our top 200. Just right on the edge, but he's broken in. I think Ben Gregg is the reason why. I mean, obviously, all the other guys have played better. You know, Nebhard, EK. But to me, Ben Gregg has been like the biggest thrust for Gonzaga to all of a sudden be one of the best teams in the country.
We call him the Energizer Bunny.
The other guy who's breaking into our top 200, and Caleb will love this, is Koby
Brea.
Yeah. Huh? Yeah.
That's
Brea.
what I said. Yeah.
Koby Brea is broken into our top 200. If you remember with that Nevada game, they're down by 17, and then all of a sudden they let Brea break loose. Not really break loose, because Dayton doesn't run many plays for him. That's what I don't get. Why do you have like the best shooter in the country and you don't run plays for him? So anyway,
it was hilarious to listen to the announcers every single game be like, oh man, UD could do this with their offense and they could do that with their offense and Brea could get more shots.
right?
And everybody on UD Twitter is like, yeah, we all know that, but Anthony Grant sucks and hasn't done that all year. It's just not going to change.
Right. And so Brea basically is just standing in the corner, and Nevada fell asleep on him, and he made 1 3, then he made another 3, and everything just collapsed from there on out. But he was the main reason why, Dayton won that game. But I mean, guy's shooting like 50% from 3. He's athletic. He competes. And if they ran more plays for him, he'd probably be averaging about 17 points per game. So, yeah.
I think he's going to be the focal point of the offense next year. Like, I think he's going to be the lead ball handler. He's going to get 15, 16 shots a game. Not only because, they're a team that I root for, but just from like a mid-level success standpoint, I'm really intrigued to see how they rebuild the team next year with Holmes leaving. But I think Brea is going to be the center point for sure.
He should be. I mean, he should really be the number 2 option right now. He probably is second on the team of scoring. Probably. I'm not sure, because he plays like the 6th most minutes, which also is perplexing. But anyway, moving on to who's cold. Shorter list. I don't want to. I hate to judge a guy on one game. And I would say probably there's only one guy on this list that I actually dropped significantly, and that's because he's been playing like crap for like a month. But the list I have for who really didn't play well in the tournament was Ryan Dunn of Virginia, Tyson Degenhardt of Boise, John Al Davis of FAU, Reed Shepherd of Kentucky, Tulu Smith, Mississippi State, Aiden Mahaney, St. Mary's, Grant Nelson, Alabama, and Jalen House in New Mexico. Of that list, who do you guys think? You were watching them and saying, "Man, I don't know if he's as good as I thought he was."
I mean, I've known this. Aiden Mahaney is not an NBA player. If anyone needed any proof, he got manhandled by Grand Canyon. I've been on this train. Somehow he was first team all conference in the WCC, which I still can't wrap my mind around. I'm not going to get down that rabbit hole unless one of you guys want to jump on that. Grant Nelson's a guy that I remember coming into this season, super intrigued. He was linked to Gonzaga as a potential last second addition. I'm like, is this the heir apparent to, Drew Timme? Just really disappointed with them in Alabama. I would have thought that given the style of play that they have, where they're fast, they're getting shots up, he would thrive. I thought that was a great fit. And I mean, his season-long numbers have been fine. I mean, they're not mind blowing. They weren't terrible, but the rebounding wasn't there. He's not a playmaker for others.
If I'm not
he doesn't.
mistaken, he was preseason player of the year in the SEC.
I don't know about that. I wouldn't be
think he
surprised if he was
was.
preseason all conference. Like I could have seen
Oh.
it being a preseason all conference guy, but like I don't know. I was really, really intrigued by him, thinking like he's gonna go on the big stage, and I'm like I'm out. I mean, yeah, he's got decent touch. He's a good free throw shooter, but outside of that, he doesn't really do a lot that gets me going. I just was really disappointed, and every time I watched him play this year, I felt like he was just hunting shots, not taking good ones.
Well, lately he's
really,
just the opposite. He's not really
he's
taking
super
many
passive.
shots. Yeah, now he's like way too passive.
Exactly. So I think for me, for a guy that was like the kind of the last addition to the portal that was really highly touted, he's been disappointing. A lot of these other guys like John L. Davis, Reed Shepherd, I've seen a season long's worth of production to where really bad timing to not show up, like really bad timing. But I'm not going to sit here and be like, well, Reed Shepherd sucks, or John L. Davis had a bad year. I'm not going to go that far. But Mahaney and Nelson are two that for me stand out. Is it's been more of a year-long thing, and this was a really bad exclamation point on that.
How about you, Caleb?
Yeah, I wouldn't say any of these guys had such a bad game that, again, I'm like, oh man, my entire opinion's going to change of them. I feel like Ryan Dunn has kind of slipped a little though over the last month of the season. He like basically stopped shooting threes in December, and I mean, he's such an incredible defender. But if he just doesn't shoot the ball ever, like I just don't.
Yeah,
I don't realistically
you're not going to guard him.
Being an NBA player.
Yeah, yeah, right, exactly. So he's probably the best defender in this draft class, but
by far,
right. But nobody's gonna guard him on the. They're gonna just sag off him and use his man to do whatever they want to do. So I don't know what to do with him. As far as my draft board, I never had him in the lottery. I think some people did, but I still have him in the low 20s, and I'm thinking about dropping him. I don't know. I really would like to see him come back another year and actually, work on his offense. But how about you, Kam? I know you and I both like Grant Nelson coming in. And, for those who don't know, I mean, he tested out unbelievably at the combine for a 6'11" guy. And we saw him, in the Summit Conference, be able to handle the ball and be like, a unicorn-like player. We haven't seen any of that at Alabama. And he's the guy that I've dropped like a rock. He went from he started the season. Now we're going all the way back to November, but I probably had him in the 30s. Then I dropped him a little. Then he was getting around the 80s. Now he's out of the top 100. So Kam, I know you liked him like I did and thought he was going to, take his game to the next level. If anything, he's regressed.
Yeah, I think part of the equation with Nelson is, I think this season he's tried so hard to sort of address some of the question marks, from his previous seasons. Like he's shooting way more threes this season. And I think that's kind of sapped some of the aggressiveness out of his game that, I really liked when he was at South Dakota. For me, though, the guy on this list that, I think just like universally people need to cool down a little bit on is Reed Shepherd. Like I see, I understand that people kind of look at this as like maybe like a role player draft. But I didn't see anything in the Kentucky game that, really suggested to me that he was an NBA player.
No, not in that game. But I mean,
but even most of the season, like he's a pacing player for Kentucky,
but I've seen 80% of his games this year.
Yeah. My thing is though, I don't think he's a top 10 pick, and that's pretty much universally where I'm seeing him going in draft boards.
You know what? I don't know if there are top 10 picks in this draft.
That's fair.
You gotta put somebody there.
I just think that there's guys that have shown as much production as Shepherd has and have a little bit more potential, I think. and have a play style that's probably going to fit in the NBA a little bit, more smoothly than Shepherd's. But that's kind of the guy I have circled. Yeah, not a great showing, not a great season for Grant Nelson, but yeah.
Kane, when you talk about fit smoothly, like I certainly understand like Reed maybe not having the ceiling of somebody like a Topic or even a Sar or maybe some of these other guys at the top of the draft board, but like dude was a 55% 3-point shooter and an 85% free throw shooter. I think he can guard two positions in the NBA. He's lethal off ball. He doesn't need the ball to score. He's a smart passer. He's a good passer. He rarely makes bad decisions. Like when you say doesn't fit seamlessly into the NBA, what kind of are you seeing where you don't think he fits?
I think ultimately, if you're a fan of a JJ Redick type player at the NBA level, then he fits. But I think that the specialist is something that we're going to see, slowly go away in the NBA, where you have more and more guys that are skilled enough to produce offensively, that still have the skill to move off the ball and play off of stars, that, that sort of role is going to become less valuable.
But
personally,
my
that's
point is he
that's my
does
look.
that.
Yeah,
He does
and well,
that.
and like
He
with,
plays off
with
ball. He plays on
defending,
ball.
yeah, but I do kind of worry about the defending two positions as well. I think, Reed Shepherd's 6'4".
Yeah, the
he's a damn
physical
good athlete.
limitations are there.
He's a damn good
I see
athlete,
that.
and he's like he gets steals and blocks.
If
Do you know
if
there's
Austin
does
Reeves,
in
if
college.
Austin Reeves can damn near have a triple double last night, and he was a 30% shooter in college, I think in a weak draft class, I like Reed. I mean, I think Reed is, maybe you can argue, yeah, like Caleb said, he doesn't have the upside to maybe become some like all NBA performer, but I just think of a lot of guys we've seen come in. He has bankable skills that like you can probably stamp. I don't know. I like Shepherd. I don't.
Yeah,
In a weak
But
draft
you and
class,
I-
I
Drew-
like
I
him.
like him. It's just I don't think he should be a top 10 pick
Drew,
in any
Drew,
draft,
Drew and I,
regardless of what level. Like, I don't know.
Drew and
Go
I,
ahead, Rich.
Drew and I said that he was Tyler Hero, but could play defense.
Yes.
Except
so they got
he's
so
short.
their offensive games are so different.
Yeah, that's a big part of it too. He's not the same. He doesn't have the same frame as Hero, which is part of the way that Hero can play how he does in the league.
Cam, who would you take? Who would you draft first, Dillingham or Shepherd?
I would take Dillingham, preferably, but that's more along where I see, sort of the offensive mindedness of the league going.
Are you a big Lou Williams fan?
I like Lou, but again, a specialist. I don't think that there's going to be a whole lot of specialists left. I do think
That's
that
Dillingham. That's my point.
I think Dillingham has, and that's fine too. I mean, if he's a Lou Will, but I think Dillingham has more playmaking upside than a guy like Lou Will. Yeah, but I mean,
I would agree.
We can get into that later. Let's get back to the back to the madness.
All right. So the other thing I was going to say, Tyson Degenhart. Not that he's not in our top 200, but he was probably in the 200s, but he's going to drop. This is his second consecutive year he's gone into the tournament as Boise State's best player and basically kind of laid an egg. Did it last year against Northwestern. Did it this year. Who'd they open up with? Boise lost to Colorado. Right. And so yeah, he's just he lacks the athleticism and the shooting. He just hasn't made enough progress there. Tyson was on the show. I like Tyson. I just think he has to drop some weight and work on his shot and work on his mobility. So he's another one I think lost out kind of big. All right, so now we're going to finish up. That's the end of our stock report, and we're going to finish up with our picks of the week. Now, first of all, Drew, I have to going back. I finally was able to score our conference tourney. You crushed me. It was just you and I who did those picks, the conference tourney picks. You had 13. By the way, there were so many upsets. We were so wrong so many times. There was something like 20 regular season conference champions that lost in their conference tournament. That's 20 out of 32. So somehow you ended up with positive points. You got 13 points. I did so poorly. I had minus 10 points. So you won that. So not only are you winning the picks of the week in terms of winning percentage, you also won that. And our bracket contest, last time I looked, no expert from the show. It's being led by my wife's former boss, who has Connecticut winning it all. I haven't looked at his bracket or anything, but and in terms of our contest, I would say right now I'm in best shape. No one can get the Final Four correct, and most of us took it on the chin with Kentucky. The reason I can get 3 right, and some can get 3 right, some can get 2 right, but I have it in terms of right now with the sleeper picks. I was able to score 23 points, and nobody else. The only other person, Cliff Dixon, also had 23. But the difference between Cliff and I, he only has 2 teams alive of his Final Four, so I have 3. So what we're going to do is now we're going to do our Sweet 16 Elite 8 picks. And the only difference from our regular picks of the week is if you get your Elite 8 pick right or your regional champ right, you will get 2 wins, not 1. So, for example, let's say you pick UConn to beat San Diego State, and then you pick UConn again to beat Illinois, Iowa State. You will get, and they do that, you will get 1 point for the first win and 2 points for the second win. The reason for that is because if you're wrong, you're going to end up, if you're wrong in the Sweet 16, you're definitely going to be wrong in the Elite 8. So you're automatically going to get 2 losses. So you follow me? All right. So we're going to start off with Caleb. Caleb, we're going to start off in the East region. Who do you have between San Diego State and UConn?
I mean, I'm just going to stick with UConn. I just don't see a way that they're just so good. They do everything well. They handled Northwestern. I don't know if they broke a sweat, and they still shot 2 of 20 from the 3-point line.
Yeah. Kam?
I just love watching Donovan Clingan play too much to pick against UConn. I'm going UConn as well.
All right. Drew?
Huskies.
All righty. I too am going with UConn. LeDee's playing well, but he's about the only player on that team that I truly trust to come up. It just seems like, one day they never seem to click on all cylinders. And that's what they're going to have to do to beat UConn. All right, so next up, we're going back to Caleb. Now we have Illinois versus Iowa State. What a game.
I mean, I think it's going to be a great game. It's basically the number 1 offense in the country versus the number 1 defense in the country. So that should be really, really fun. I think I'm going to have to pick Illinois. I really like their versatility on offense. I know we've talked about their lack of a true point guard, but I like Damask. I like Shannon. I think this could be a game where Iowa State's lack of seniority and experience shows up.
What do you say, Kam?
Yeah, big thing for me, and this is actually flipping from my bracket, but I just think that the lack of free throw shooting is going to come back to bite Iowa State at some point. So I'm gonna go Illinois here.
Wow. Drew?
Yeah, I flip-flopped on this one a couple of times. I don't even remember who I took in my bracket at this point, but I'm also going to go with Illinois. Like, I just think that they've looked pretty sharp, and Terrence Shannon's just been on a tear and could very easily go into that game and be the best player on the court. And sometimes in March, that's the thing that you need.
Wow. Based on our bracket show, I thought I was going to be the only one picking Illinois. And now here I am. I'm just picking like the rest of you. Illinois. I picked Illinois on my bracket. I really like this team. I thought preseason they had a chance to win, be in the Final Four. And yeah. All right. So now we're going to go for the Eastern Regional Champ. We all have UConn versus Illinois. Who you got, Caleb?
I gotta stick with UConn. Again, I really like their depth, especially like their depth at the big spot. They've got a 4-star who doesn't even play. They've got Samson Johnson coming off the bench. I think with Illinois' versatility and like Dane Danger and some of the different bigs that they can throw, having that depth at the big spot is going to be really crucial.
Yeah. Illinois certainly has the depth to match up with Connecticut. I just don't think they have the consistency. I mean, UConn's just a well-oiled machine. And we've seen Illinois, some days they turn the ball over a lot. Some days they can't shoot straight. Now we haven't seen that lately, but we did see it during the season. So should be UConn's toughest test so far. But I got to go with UConn. How about you, Kam?
Yeah, I'm sticking UConn.
How about you, Drew?
Taking the Huskies.
Wow. So we have no differences. All right. So now we move on to. I just put UCOM, the Connecticut Comrades. So now we move on to the West, and the first game there is Clemson versus Arizona. Boy, oh boy, Clemson looks like a different team with their veteran point guard who really has struggled for most of the season. And I'm drawing a blank on his name, but he's just been red hot. Chase Hunter. Chase Hunter's just been red hot. So who you got, Caleb? Clemson or Arizona?
I don't know. I mean, Clemson's played so well. They beat some really good teams, right? They beat Bama, South Carolina, TCU, UAB, Boise, like a lot of really good. Man, they played a tough schedule. I just pick Arizona. Like, I just feel like they're the better team at the end of the day. I don't have a great reason for it. I just feel like I've liked the way that Arizona's played. They've kind of handled business and played really well.
All right. Kam?
Yeah, this Arizona team has just always kind of confused me. I'm going Clemson here. I'm just not a fan of the way that they play. Also, that's a team that perennially just disappoints in March Madness, regardless how much talent they have. Give me Clemson.
What do you say, Drew?
Yeah, I think I'm with Kam on this one. This Arizona, from a talent standpoint, should be able to compete with anybody in the country from their size, their shooting, their guard play. But as someone who watches them play through their entire conference, their entire preseason as a West Coast guy, I feel like they're due for the letdown, and they're running into a team that is kind of on the other end of that spectrum where they've started really well, kind of petered off, and are really hot again. I'm going to take Clemson.
All right. This one's very tough. And I'm going to go with Arizona because I think that maybe Clemson doesn't even beat Baylor if Chase Hunter doesn't go crazy. This is not really Chase Hunter's, MO. And I have a feeling he might come down to earth. And if he does, then I think it makes Clemson a good team, but not a great team. And so I'm going to go with Arizona, but I hear what you guys are saying. All right. So going back to Caleb, and the other game in the West region is Alabama versus UNC.
I mean, I think first, this is one of the more exciting. Not that any of these won't be exciting, but I think this one's going to be really fun, both just with the pace that both teams like to play, with the guards on both teams. Um, I think UNC. I like the depth across the roster. They've got a balanced offense. I don't think Alabama is going to be able to play the same sort of like undisciplined, just beat the shit out of you style that they played against Grand Canyon. Like, this UNC team has the horses to like really match them. And I think especially down low, just like the physicality of Baycott, Ingram, some of the guys that they can bring off the bench is just something that from a physicality standpoint, like Alabama's going to try. I just don't think they can match that physicality of UNC down.
Right. What do you think, Kim?
Yeah, I just think the final score is going to look like it was a game, but I don't think it is really going to be much of a game. I'm taking Tar Heels. I just think, Caleb touched on it. I think UNC loves to play fast, just like Alabama does, but they're far more composed as a team, and I think that's gonna win out for the Tar Heels.
Yeah. Drew?
Yeah, I picked UNC to win it. I think they're one of the few teams in the country that, Caleb and Cam hit it all in the head. Everything they said is accurate. I also think it boils down to they're one of the teams, I think, that match up well enough against like a UConn. UConn's been a buzzsaw, and I think the Tar Heels have the depth, the athleticism, and the size to compete with the UConn. So I'm taking Tar Heels.
I don't think this game is going to be close. I think Baycott's probably going to foul out 2 or 3 of Alabama's bigs. I mean, Alabama's been looking better on defense, but let's look at who they played. Last time they was 5-on-1, when Grand Canyon had the ball, and they still almost beat them. So, yeah, I don't think this one's close. I think UNC lays it to them. All right, so moving on to the Western Regional Championship. Caleb, you have Arizona versus North Carolina. Who you got?
Sticking with UConn, I liked what Drew said earlier about North Carolina being one of the teams that really has the potential to kind of match up with UConn. Rich, I know at the beginning of the season, right, we did our ACC preview, and I said UNC is one of those teams to watch out for. I love the balance across their team. Love Harrison Ingram. I know Cadeau doesn't really shoot the ball well, but I think they've got some really good versatility in their backcourt with him, Trimble, RJ Davis. He plays with the composure. Cadeau plays with the composure of an older guy. And especially if Kylan Boswell for Arizona doesn't show up, like, I know they beat UD by 10, 15, whatever it was, but Boswell did not have a good game. They really need him to play, to just play really well. It's like he's got to score 12 to 15 points, I think, per game if they want to make it to the Final Four.
Right. What do you think, Caleb? Now you have Clemson versus UNC. I believe these two teams split during the year. Who you got?
Yeah, I mean, I just think UNC can be in an outscoring type of matchup, and I think they're going to do that against Alabama, and I think they can beat you in a grinded out sort of game, and I think we'll see that against Clemson. Just going Tar Heels here.
And I assume, Drew, you're going, since you picked UNC to win it all, you too are going with the Tar Heels?
Yeah, I think they have the bodies that they can throw at PJ Hall, who is a stud, but they can definitely find a way to slow him down. They have an alpha guard that can take a game over, especially offensively, but they have 2 other guys in Tremble, and I really like Cadeau. Like, I like Caleb's right. Cadeau plays above his station in terms of like the mental aspect, but that dude plays with a lot of energy and a lot of passion. And like, there's always those like kind of young guys, I feel like, on championship teams that like have moments and make plays. And I think he kind of fits that category. I think back to like Grayson Allen or Dante DiVincenzo, guys that like on the big stage, they're young, but they pop. He's the type of guy to me that has that upside, not because he's going to go score 30, but because he's going to dive on the floor for a loose ball. He's going to take a charge. I mean, he had they won their game. I think it was in the first round, and he's literally in the press conference going, "I played terrible. I didn't take a." He's like, "I bailed out of a charge and I didn't dive on the floor." I'm like, "Yeah, this kid's made of the right stuff." So I think UNC's going to take care of business here, and they're familiar with Clemson. That's who I have them playing.
Right. Yeah, I have to favor UNC too. I just think they have too many weapons. It could be a very close game, but I like UNC. All right. So now we move on to the South region, and we have the only double-digit seed to make it to the Sweet 16. Also based on our sleeper criteria, which was 8 or higher. They are the only sleeper in the Sweet 16, and that's NC State. And they are matching up against Marquette. Who you got, Caleb?
I think I have to go with Marquette. I really like this Marquette team. I don't remember when it was, but there was like a point where you and I picked Final Four teams in the middle of the season, and Marquette had fallen down to like 16th or 17th. I said, give me Marquette. Really like the balance of this team. I think Marquette, the things to look for me, both like Marquette throughout the whole year has really doubled bigs pretty aggressively, and they do it from a bunch of different places in the court. So like, how are they going to double DJ Burns? Are they going to, because he passes pretty well to the post, and so like, how does he handle that aggressive double? And then I'm also really interested to see how Gohlke is able to maybe flip some screens against Burns, him and Iguodaro. Maybe if they've got Ben Gold out there, run some pick and pop actions. I think Gohlke is probably going to be the first guard this tournament who's really able to like force Burns into actions almost every single time down the court. So I'm going to have to go with this Marquette team. Really like their balance.
All right. Kam?
Yeah, I think, come to think of it, I think I picked Marquette as a preseason Final Four team. They've choked out some games this season, but, I just think their speed is going to be really important against this NC State team. I think especially with Iguodaro, they're really going to be able to take advantage of DJ Burns on the inside. I'm going to stick with Marquette here.
We got Drew.
Yeah, I mean, again, I know it's chalky, but I'm going to take Marquette. I think they just came off of a game where they beat Colorado, where they played, Burns is a kind of another level to it, but they just played a like big physical player in Eddie Lampkin. Iguodaro is a 6'11" athlete. I go back to early in the year. I mean, he was able to do some stuff against even Zach Edey when they met in the Maui. So I think that their overall team construction, they're just a better team, I believe. I think their best players are better than NC State's best players. I think they just came off a game where they were able to, survive and to a degree, counter a big physical post like that. And I think Cole's going to be the best player on the court. And when their best player on the court is also your point guard, good things tend to happen in March.
Right. One thing, there may be a blessing out of Marquette, not being healthy, down the stretch. I've been impressed with the role players, guys like Chase Ross, Ben Gold, Joplin. This team is looking deeper, and it looks like it has more weapons than just the big three. I got to go with Marquette too. All right, so now we have a really interesting matchup in the South region, Duke versus Houston.
I hate this because I was very down on this Duke team coming into the tournament, right? We talked about whoever they play in the second round, they're definitely losing. It doesn't even matter. And then they just steamrolled James Madison. I don't think James Madison played the game within like 20 points for 60% of the game. So this game is so tough for me. I honestly don't know. If the same Duke team that plays if they come in, the thing that surprised me, I think against James Madison was how physical they played. Like from the jump, they took it at James Madison. And I know James Madison doesn't have like the size of some of these other teams, whether it be, I don't know, some of the ACC teams, right? Like NC State, UNC, Clemson, they all have some big bodies. I know JMU doesn't have that size, but man, Duke just took it at them. If Duke plays like that, like they're going to win the game, right? Like Houston doesn't have great size. They're super tough. They're super physical, but they just don't have some of the size.
No, I mean, they're bigs. They're bigs. They're like 6'8".
Yeah. And they're not healthy. Like, I mean, they're just not 100%. They're not even close to it. I'm terrified to do this, and I feel like I'm going to be wrong. But I think I'm going to pick Duke. I'm just like set. I'm going to have to drop some serious money betting Houston to just really balance out my emotions going into this game. I'm so fascinated to see Tyrese Proctor guard Jamal Shed. Like, he played terrible against the length from Iowa State in the Big 12 title game. And so I think Proctor's length and ability to potentially slide in front of Shed is going to be really interesting. And then I think Filipowski's processing and his ability to play out of the high post, to pass out of the high post with the pressure that Houston likes to bring, I think could get to some open shots for Roach and McCain on the back door. Even some like high-low action from Filipowski to Mitchell down low could be really interesting as well. I like feel terrible about this choice either way, but I think that's what I'm going to pick.
All right. Kam?
Yeah, I mean, it's wild to see a Duke fan this scared of picking Duke. Statistically, I think this Duke team's legit. They've lost a lot of close games that they shouldn't lose. But I mean, we just watched Houston really, really struggle with a very flawed Texas A&M team. Took them down to the absolute wire. I've had Houston out at this point in pretty much every bracket. I'm going to go with Duke here. I just think Houston's running out of steam. It's been a great season. Keep continuing the tournament play like this. They need to be healthy, and it's just not the case.
Drew?
Everything tells me that like Duke is in a prime position to win this game. They had, if you look at all these teams, probably the easiest path here and getting a 13 and a 13 and a 12. And I know a lot of us had picked, like I was with Caleb. I don't know if Duke gets out of the second round more from the mental, not just the talent, but I mean, this team is super talented and can beat any of these teams on any given night. But I'm going to give Houston one last pick here. I just think that they're the type of team, they're the fighter that's going to give you everything they've got. They're going to come out of this game super bloodied, and they're going to be like a scene from Rocky 2 where they both throw the punch, they both hit each other, they go down, and Houston, just because they're tougher, is going to be able to just like limp up and grab the rope and get the win. Just because I think everything tells me from a pure basketball standpoint, Duke is bigger. Duke is more skilled, particularly at the bigs. Like their post players they don't have any post players on Houston, but like I just think that this team is been conditioned and bred to like look at this Duke team and play with a chip on their shoulder. Like I think this Houston team's going to come into this game feeling disrespected because that's just the way that they operate. And I think the first 5 minutes of this game are going to tell you everything you need to know. If Duke comes out, like Caleb said, with physicality and says we're not going to be intimidated, Duke's as good, if not better, probably at every position down the board. But if Duke comes out even on their heels a little bit, Houston's going to smell the blood in the water and just keep on coming. And you cannot kill this team. They don't die. They should have lost that game. Everything from a boxer tells you they should have lost the game to A&M, and they pulled it out. Not a lot of teams have the mental fortitude to do that. So I'm taking Houston in this one, but I think this is a game.
I think this is the toughest game to pick in the Sweet 16.
Agreed.
I had Houston out at this point. I had them losing in the second round. Of course, I also I don't remember. I actually went two different ways with Duke and Wisconsin meeting, but I think I usually don't do that. But anyway, Duke, as you all said, has the talent. They certainly have the shooting. They have better depth. Of course, Houston has the toughness in defense, and typically I would go with offense over defense, but there was something about that game. Now, I was rooting for Texas A&M because I had Houston falling in that round, and I just thought it was going to be Nebraska, but I couldn't believe it. I mean, they have a guy who hasn't played all season in Ramon Walker, who's been injured forever, and he's in the game. And then they bring some walk on and he gets fouled. It
was actually John Laney's stunt double.
Well, it was just like those Halloween movies where the guy just won't die, And here's the other thing is, Duke just seemed just a little too cocky to me in that James Madison game. And there's no way they're going to shoot like that again. Okay. And they're young and they're going to come in thinking they're going to shoot like that again. But what are they going to do when McCain opens the game 0 for 3? Okay. If Houston opens the game 0 for 3, they won't be phased. But if McCain does and all those other young guys do, they're going to start to doubt themselves. I'm going to go with the veterans. I'm going to go with Houston. All right, so now we move on to the regional champs, and we have different matchups. Caleb, you have Marquette and Duke.
I mean, I think it's going to be Marquette. Like, I think it's going to be Marquette no matter who wins the Duke-Houston game. I really just think the balance across the board, they can score inside, they can score outside. The emergence isn't even the right word, but I think it was Drew brought him up earlier, Kam Jones, just everybody really getting to see how freaking good he is, and his ability to like get to the rim on off-ball actions and their ability to play pressure defense. They've got like one weakness, which is like defensive rebounding, and Houston certainly doesn't have the size to take advantage of that. And I just think Marquette's an infinitely tougher team than Duke, and they've got the guards, they've got the experience. They really match up pretty well with Duke across the board. So I'm going to go with Marquette, kind of no matter who they play.
All right. I hear you there. Cam?
Oh, shockingly, I'm going to go Duke here.
Wow, that is shocking.
I just think this Marquette team, granted they were injured for part of the season, they have a tendency to choke out these games. And Duke does too, but I think Duke is playing a little bit hotter at the moment. And I think that's just going to be the difference maker here. Yeah, I just think, ultimately too, the guard play is a little bit of a question mark for me with Marquette. I love Kohlke. I love what he does. I love the way that he can manage a game, but I wonder, if Iguodaro is a little bit slow, if Kam Jones is a little off, how much production are you really going to get out of Kohlke? So I'm going to go Duke here.
All right. Drew, you and I have a different matchup. We have Marquette and Houston. Mind you, this is all being played in Dallas, by the way. This regional.
Yeah. I think, if anything, that gives me a little bit more confidence to my Houston pick in the first matchup, the Duke versus Houston.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to the champ, I think I'm with Caleb on this one. I think I'm going to take Marquette, whereas Houston is, getting by with duct tape and icy hot for their players. Marquette is finally getting healthy. And I think that, Kohlke versus Shed is going to be one of those, like, just elite college point guard matchups that, no one's going to talk about because it's not the NBA, but like for us, we're going to sit there and go like, these are two of the best in the country at what they do. I think Iguodaro at 6'11" with his athleticism, they don't have an answer for Flip because of Flip's skill. They're not going to have an answer for Oso because of his size and athleticism around the rim. And I think, Kam Jones is kind of the X factor where Houston's arguably their three best guys are all 6'1", 6'2", with Sharp, Cryer, and Shed. Like Kam Jones is legit 6'5", 6'6", and somebody's going to have to guard him. And while Houston does defend, the way he's playing right now is at a really high level. He's got a big wing. I think Marquette's just going to be able to edge this one out. If Houston's healthy, it's a whole different ballgame, but Marquette is healthy, and I think matches up pretty well.
Yep. From a pure standpoint, where we have to make a pick for not only the Thursdays and Fridays games, but then we have to make a pick for the weekend game. The most likely team to get to the Elite Eight right now is Marquette because they play NC State. So they're a smart pick right there. And I do like them, just like Caleb said, I like them over Duke. I like them over Houston. And they're the smart play. For those who like statistics and probability. So, but even beside that, I still like Marquette. So there we go. All right, so now we move on to the last region, and that's the Midwest region, and we open up with Purdue versus Gonzaga. Who you got, Caleb?
I'm gonna go Purdue. I don't think it's gonna. I think this is a game that's gonna. The score is gonna look closer than the game really is. I think most of the stuff that Gonzaga wants to do, pound the ball down low, be patient, take good shots on offense. Like Purdue does all those things just better. And I think from a matchup perspective, I think the matchups favor Purdue. Like Gonzaga's been playing a 3-guard lineup most of the season, or the second half of the season, which kind of puts Gregg, who's 6'10", on chasing pin downs, chasing Fletcher Loyer on pin downs, and that just doesn't seem like it's going to go particularly well. The swing kind of thing to look at is really going to be Gonzaga's 3-point shooting. I think like the first half of the season, they shot like 30% from 3 the first half of the season, and then although their volume dropped a lot, they're closer to 40% the second half of the season. So I think that's going to be kind of the thing to look at, but again, everything Gonzaga does, I think Purdue wants to do the same thing. It's kind of just does it better. And they're a little bit more bigger. They're a little bigger, got a little bit more versatility offensively and with the roster. So I think it'll be Purdue by, I don't know, 8 to 10.
Kim?
Yeah, last episode is talking about how, Purdue is yet again one of those teams that continues to disappoint in tournament play, but man, Zach Edey's playing the best basketball of his life right now, and that's a pretty scary thing. They've really just been steamrolling everybody. Give me the Boilermakers. Selfishly, I hope it's Gonzaga, but yeah, I don't see anybody stopping Edey right now. He's on a mission.
All right, Drew, you're up.
I'm gonna do it, man. I'm gonna do it. It's been a chalky ass bracket. I'm gonna do it. I'm taking my Zags. Cam's right. This is the best. I'm a known Edey hater. Is kind of the extreme, I guess, but I'm not an Edey guy. But he is playing incredible. You can't deny the production. Literally embarrassed Utah State. Like those guys quit 5 minutes into that game, and Edey just had their way with them. I think the Zags, the X factor is going to be shooting. Caleb's 100% right. We shot 6 for 32 against them in Maui, but that was months ago. They're shooting much better. I think Gregg into the lineup has been a jolt. Now it's going to be interesting. Can he survive out on the perimeter for long enough stretches and not be a liability? I know everyone's going to talk about what are they going to do with Edey. I think that's the matchup. If Gregg can play the 3 consistently and stay out of foul trouble and be able to defend in space, I think the Zags have a chance because they are a big team. They're going to have the bodies to throw at Edey between Ike, Gregg, Huff, Watson. All those guys can play that 4. And obviously no one's close in size, but that's a lot of fouls between them. I think Nembhard has been quietly playing as a pure point guard, as good as anybody in the country in terms of just setting guys up. So if guys can hit open shots and they can make Edey's life, just make him work. He's going to get his points, but just make him work for it. I think Utah State was literally scared of him and let him do whatever he wanted. If Gonzaga can make him work, I think it's a game. I think Caleb's right, though. I think this is going to be 8 to 10. I think this is a battle. These teams have played each other. And I'm going to roll with my boy Mark Few and March, and I think they figure it out.
All righty. I'm going to have to go with Purdue. I think Edey's going to foul out Gonzaga's front line like he does everybody else's front line. I think there is a way to beat Purdue, but Gonzaga doesn't really have the tools to do it. And that's, by using full court pressure, slowing down their advance so that they have less time to work in the half court, also forcing turnovers over guards that aren't very big or very athletic. But I just don't see Gonzaga being able to do that. So I don't think it's a good matchup for them. So I'm going to go with Purdue. All right. So now we have Creighton versus Tennessee. Both of them almost lost in the second round. Who you got, Caleb?
First I want to say that this is probably one of the best games of the Sweet 16. Like this is almost like a Final Four level game.
Oh yeah.
Which I know everybody loves their upsets. I'm relatively happy that it's been mostly chalk because that means that all of these games going forward are going to be really freaking good basketball teams.
Nice.
For sure.
Yeah, I'm particularly super excited for this game. I think the thing to look out for is really going to be Creighton's defense and Tennessee's offense. Rick Barnes is notoriously not great at organizing an offense. However, Dalton Connect is notoriously great at scoring the ball. So it's going to be Rick Barnes versus Dalton Connect, who wins out. Yeah, it's kind of a joke. I really though, Creighton really likes to have guys shoot mid-range jumpers. I think defensively, they like percentage-wise, they force teams that play against them to shoot more mid-range jumpers than any other team in the country. And Tennessee, outside of Connect, sucks at shooting mid-range jumpers. So I think, in all honesty, I think that's going to be kind of where we see the battle lie. Can Tennessee get the shots that they want, especially if it's not Connect? I think I'm going to have to go with Creighton. Sorry, with Creighton. I'm a huge Dalton Connect guy. I think like Connect's a top 10 draft pick. But I really like the guards for Creighton. I think like Kalkbrenner winning 3 straight Big East Defensive Player of the Years is like actually historic. Like if you look at the guys who've done that, it's like Ewing and I think like one other person. And I just think the balance that Creighton has on offensively, right? Like, sure, it's Alexander and it's Shireman, but like both of those guys can pass really well. Both of those guys are really smart offensive players. And I just don't see Tennessee at the end of the day really having enough offense. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if they win, but I think Creighton is going to be able to pull it out due to that offense.
All right, Kam?
Sorry, Kam.
It's all good, man. I hear you. Yeah, speaking of another team that, is infamous for choking in March, my beloved Vols. Well, we did, and we made it out somehow. We choked, and we're still here. Man, I'll tell you though, Creighton scares me. This team really feels a lot like a Walmart brand version of UConn. And in a lot of ways, like they have that similar balance between offense, defense, similar guard play. To me, the difference in this game is really, the Jonas Adu Kalkbrenner matchup. How much offense is Kalkbrenner going to be able to produce, with a size mismatch on that end? But I think if this becomes a pretty guard heavy sort of game, Tennessee matches up really well on the perimeter with all of Creighton's guards and wings. I think it really comes down to game speed, game pace. If it's kind of a slow, grinded out game that works for Tennessee, if it gets sped up, you really like Creighton's chances. Obviously, I'm going with Tennessee, but that's my personal belief here. I think this is a hell of a matchup.
Drew?
Yeah, I think this is my favorite, the game I'm like most looking forward to. It's probably this or the Illinois-Iowa State game that I'm like most looking forward to, just, from a basketball standpoint. I don't have to worry about like my fandom causing me to have an aneurysm mid-game. So I can just sit back and enjoy the battle. Cam's going to relate to that probably because he's got his volunteers in this one. I'm going to go with Tennessee. I think that this is Tennessee. They've had a few duds here, sure. But like in past years, that game against Texas is a game that they would have found a way to lose. Like the offense would have not shown, like something would have happened if this in past years with Rick Barnes at home where you're like, wow, they only scored 62 and they lost 62-66 or something. But they found a way to gut it out. They got the points when they needed them. Guys hit just enough shots to make it happen. So, I mean, both of these teams have been kind of on like that borderline upset watch. I'm going to take Tennessee. I picked them to the Final Four. I think this is a hell of a game, though. And I think whoever dictates the pace is going to win this one. Does Tennessee get to play in their style, or does Creighton get to play in theirs? And that's going to be what decides it.
Tennessee obviously has better depth, has better athleticism. I think is a better defensive team, and Creighton's obviously is better offensive team. One thing that bothers me about Creighton is they don't really utilize Kalkbrenner in crunch situations, and they don't really attack the basket a lot. I suppose I could make the same argument. I can remember before Ziegler's injury, it seemed like he was really, used to attack the basket a lot, and they've always kind of had a post presence. I don't know. I kind of think whoever can has the better paint scoring is going to win this game, and it's something that neither team does very well. But my gut's just telling me Tennessee. Baylor Shireman played 50 minutes. He played all 50 minutes in that double overtime game. You just got to think that somehow that's going to start to wear down. They're going to start to wear down. And so I'm going to go with Tennessee, but I agree with all of you that should be a very fun game. All right, so now we have all kinds of different matchups here for the Midwest Regional Championship. Caleb, you have Purdue versus Creighton.
I think Purdue, Creighton, I think this is, you talk about Shireman playing 50 minutes, and they do have a week off. So, I think that's going to be super beneficial. But if you really want to see, the 50 minutes from all of the guys, all of the starters really start to play a factor, it's going to be in that game 2 days later against Purdue, especially with the physicality of Edey. And they just don't really have a big that they can go to besides Kalkbrenner. And I don't think their defense is particularly aggressive enough to put Purdue in situations where those guards are uncomfortable. So I'll have to go Purdue on that one as well.
All right. Kim, we debated this last week in our this particular matchup in our bracket show. I assume you're going with Tennessee.
Yeah, I got to go Tennessee. But, man, if there's a matchup that does not work well for Tennessee, it's got to be Purdue. It's a team that struggles against size and interior scoring, and that's what Zach Edey does. But, it would have to be a hot shooting night for Tennessee. But we'll see what happens.
All right. Drew, you have Gonzaga versus Tennessee.
Didn't realize I was muted. I'll take Tennessee here. I got love for my Zags. I took Tennessee to get to the Final Four. I actually think this would be a really fun game to watch. I think both of these teams are pretty balanced. I just think Tennessee has a little bit of a stronger identity on the defensive end, whereas the Zags, who are normally known for their offense this year, have been a little bit more hit and miss there. And so I just think Tennessee kind of has that bankable, we can fall back on being a defensive-minded team where, when everything clicks with Gonzaga, like we saw against Kansas or McNeese, they can beat anybody just because they're, a mark few offense is a beautiful thing to watch. I just think that this team hasn't proven that night in, night out, they can do that. We watched them buzzsaw St. Mary's at St. Mary's, and then literally a week later against the same exact team on a neutral court get stymied. And I think Tennessee is a much better team, significantly better team than St. Mary's. So I'll take Tennessee.
Right. This Purdue-Tennessee matchup, I have been debating ever since the bracket came out. I flip-flopped. First I thought Purdue, then I thought Tennessee, then I thought Purdue, then I went back to Tennessee. I'm going to go with Tennessee, even though, by the way, they met in Maui. I think Purdue won by 4. I'm going to go with Tennessee. I think they're going to be able to apply the pressure that I talked about that makes it difficult on Purdue. I think they have the athletes to do that and the defenders to do that. So I'm going to go with Tennessee, but boy, what a great game. All right. So that wraps it up. We by the way, if it works out this way, looking at our overall picks, the Final Four would be UConn, North Carolina, Marquette, and Tennessee. Interestingly enough, if Caleb's right and somehow, because he has Creighton winning, getting to the Elite Eight, if they would make that jump, you could have 3 Big East teams in the Final Four. Not much of a leap to get there either. Big East fans would be very pleased with that. So that wraps up our picks of the week. As always, I want to thank all of our listeners. I want to thank all the guys for joining me today. I was going to say a special guest, but we didn't have a special guest. Caleb's special. So thank you guys for joining us. If you ever miss an episode, you can get caught up on hoopsprospects.com. Also, if you'd like to send us a question for the mailbag, which we never answer, please email it to admin@hoopsprospects.com. I don't remember the last time we've done a mailbag. We also take questions via social media on Twitter @HoopsProspects, on Instagram @TheHoopsProspects, and on Facebook @HoopsPros. We'll be back next week for our Final Four special. Not only will we be making our Final Four picks, but we'll also be picking our national championship. And of course, we'll talk more about college hoops, the portal, and coaching changes, and all the moving parts. College basketball has become year-round these days, and I think it's going to stay that way forever because of the portal and because of NIL. Any final thoughts, gentlemen?
Go Caitlin Clark.
All righty. Okay, we'll see you next week.